Hello and welcome. This is episode 8 of the Eagle Experience. I'm here with Cassie Adams, so let's get straight into it. Tell me about yourself.
Hi, my name is Cassie Adams. My maiden name was Johnson. So when I was here, I was Cassie Johnson. I'm married. My husband's name is John Adams, like the president. So everyone always thinks that's super funny. We have 3 kids. Our oldest daughter is almost 19. Sounds so old. Our middle daughter is 9, and then I have a son who is 5. And I am currently, for work, I'm a house parent at Eagle Ranch, which is like a residential therapeutic center for families in crisis. And then I work part-time at my church, Emmaus Church in Beaufort. I work with global missions, with youth ministry, and with foster and adoption ministry. And I'm a Chestatee alum and former Chestatee staff member and former Chestatee teacher and former Chestatee parent. And in my free time, I'm boring and read nonfiction, not that I have a lot of free time. And I'm a self-proclaimed Disney adult, and I am very proud of that.
So similar to Katie Roundtree, which if you haven't seen that episode, go ahead and check it out. You've really been here for a long time, done a lot of different things here at Chestatee. So tell us about that, kind of the history of you being here at Chestatee.
Sure. I actually knew Katie Roundtree many of the times I was here. So I started here at Chestatee when the school opened in 1999. I was a 6th grader, similar to same as Molly Nigro, who was one of your guests on your show. Molly and I were actually very best friends in 6th grade. And so I was here when the school opened. I was here at the pre-meetings. I think I heard Suzanne talk about some of those pre-meetings before the school even opened. I remember walking through here before it was even done and, seeing it as it was work in progress. And so the student here for those 3 years from 1999 to 2002, and then went through high school, graduated from Chestatee, went to college. And then when I finished college, I needed a job. And I happened to graduate college in 2010 when there was a recession, which probably doesn't mean much to middle schoolers, but when you're a college graduate and need a job, that's a bad thing. And so my mom happened to be on the school improvement team here at Chestatee Academy at the time. And so she was telling the principal, Suzanne Gerard, that I needed a job and I couldn't find a job. There were no jobs. And so Suzanne reached out and hired me to work here right out of college. So then I worked here for 2 years, I think. And then left, I moved away. And then when my husband and I moved out of state, when we came back, I had a teaching degree by then, and I was looking for a job. And my brother-in-law actually worked here at Chestatee Academy as the 8th grade history teacher, but they were moving to Atlanta. And he was like, you should apply for my job. So I did, and I came back as a teacher, and I taught here for 3 years when I was here. And then our daughter was a student here as a 6th and 7th grader.
So with all your time here at Chestatee, I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories. So if you would, go ahead and kind of take it away. Tell us about some of your most memorable experiences here at Chestatee.
I have so many memories here. It's hard to begin to choose. So I was thinking about kind of each year. My memory that stood out from 6th grade was we had to do a rock cycle project for Miss Forrest, who was a teacher here for a long time, and now she's Miss Alexander. She's married to Mr. Alexander, who's an 8th grade teacher, and her daughter was my age. Her name's Robin, and we had to make a rock song, like rock music song about the rock cycle. And I remember we were at Miss Forrest's house because her daughter was in my group, and it was me and her and Molly Moore, Nigro. And I remember that project so vividly. It was so much fun, and we made a rock song about the rock cycle. In the 7th grade, I was part of the FCA, and we decided that we didn't want anyone to be sad on Valentine's Day that year because we had seen people be sad with we're delivering candygrams and flowers in the 6th grade, and we didn't want anyone to be left out. So we put a Valentine in every single locker and every single hallway. And at that time, not even every locker was used because there were not enough students for all of the lockers. But we put one in everyone anyway. So we were up late at, I don't remember whose house, signing all of these Valentines and putting just the little elementary school Valentines. It was so fun. 8th grade was probably my favorite year. We had so much fun that year. There was a staff basketball game where they played the Harlem Globetrotters, and I can remember it was so funny, and we just thought that it was so hilarious. And we had 8th grade day. I think it might have been the first 8th grade day. Maybe the class before us had one. But it was so much fun, and we had so much fun as students. We used to have dances every month, which is crazy. Having been a middle school teacher, that sounds horrible. But we had a middle school dance every month. We just had so much fun as students.
So you also went here in high school, and we've heard a little story about your senior year attendance from your mom that says you got around the attendance policy with something with the school board. So tell us about that.
I love that my mom has told on me for this podcast. So when I was a senior in high school, did not understand school politics at the time. But when I was a senior in high school, something happened at the Hall County School Board. And the second semester of my senior year, there was no attendance policy. I don't know the ins and outs. I was 18. I didn't care. But what was true is that we only had to be at school every 10 days, because if you miss more than 10 consecutive days, once you have a driver's license, you lose your driver's license. Your school attendance is tied to your driver's license. But we were all smart enough to know as long as we go every 10 days, nothing bad would happen. And so we missed a lot of school. We skipped a lot of school. We would go to Longstreet Cafe every Friday morning. All of the high schools would go, and everybody wore their letter jackets and sat at different tables, like something out of a TV show, but it was my real life. And we would just stay late. I had theater my first period of the day that semester, and I would text the teacher and be like, I'm not coming, I'll be there later. And I would just not go. But the most ridiculous was, so the whole county had this, there was just no attendance policy. And one of my best friends was a guy at West Hall High School. And so one day he just came to school with me and just walked in the door. Bill Thompson was the principal at the time, and his son played football with this friend of mine. So he literally saw my friend, knew he was a West Hall student, was just like, hey, what's up? And he just went to class with me. So it was a crazy time. There were several people in my senior class who actually did not graduate because they missed so much school and failed their classes. But we had a lot of fun.
Sounds great, but I think the school board probably learned a lesson after that.
Yeah, there's an attendance policy now. You should go to school.
So with the topic of your mom, tell us about all your connections to Chestatee and the community.
Yeah, so I grew up here. My family moved to Hall County when I was in the first grade. I went to McEver Elementary School. My parents are Kevin and Sandy Johnson. My dad is a doctor here in the community. So my whole life, I've been Dr. Johnson's daughter everywhere I go, which I love. Maybe I didn't love that in middle school, but now as an adult, I love when people are like, oh, you're Kevin and Sandy's daughter. And I'm like, yeah, because I love my parents. I think they're great. Not that most middle schoolers feel that way. And they're very involved in their church. They go to Christ Place Church, which used to be Blackshear Place Church, and so I knew a lot of people through that. And then I went to McEver and then Chestatee, and I've worked in this community. I also worked at Lanier Christian Academy, so I have a lot of connections there. And now my family lives in South Hall, and my husband taught at Johnson High School, so I have a lot of connections now on the south end of the county. So it's very much just feels like my home, and I see people I know everywhere I go.
Now, you've already touched on this topic a little bit, but tell us about what you're doing as a career now.
Yeah, so I was a teacher. I taught 8th grade history mostly for most of my career. I taught in South Carolina, taught here at Chestatee. I taught at Lanier Christian Academy. And then really, this is truly how it happened. One of my mom's friends called me in January of 2022, I was teaching at Lanier Christian Academy. My husband was teaching at Johnson. And we were foster parents. We were foster parents for 4.5 years at that time. And she knew a lot about my life because whether you know this or not, your parents' friends know a lot about your life. And they still do, even when you're an adult, because they tell them all your business. And so my mom's friend knew that we were ready to stop being foster parents for a while. And I was thinking I was ready to get out of teaching for a while. And so she called me and she said, God told me that you're going to be a house parent at Eagle Ranch. And I kind of knew what Eagle Ranch was because this friend of my mom's, they had been house parents there when I was a kid, and I knew their kids. And I'd never really been there. I didn't really know what they did. I kind of knew what they did. My husband had never even heard of it. And so we went out there and we visited. And what they do is it's these houses with house parents, and that's what I do, and my husband, and we live there. It's our whole life is we live there, and families who are struggling at home for a variety of reasons. Maybe there's been something traumatic in their family. Maybe their child has some sort of a disability that affects their behavior or their learning, and they're just having a hard time at home. They come to us, and there's a big interview process, and then their kids actually come to live with us. So we have, right now, my family, we serve high school girls. So my husband, our 2 younger children live in our home, and we have 3 high school girls who live with us. 2 of them have been there almost 2 years, and one's been there about 9 months. And so we just provide a safe place for them. We provide space. Usually there's been some sort of conflict, so they just need a break from their parents for a while. Their parents need a break from them. And we provide all sorts of therapeutic services for the residents, for their families. We do a lot of different trainings on trauma and parenting and all sorts of different things. And then the hope is that after 18 to 24 months, that the families will have learned the skills, both the kids and the parents, to be put back together and for them to move home. So I kind of joke I'm a professional parent. That's my full-time job. There are some things like we have lots of paperwork and meetings, but really it's just being in the home with the girls and providing that stability. So that's my full-time job. And then I also have a part-time job at our church. So I work in our church ministries as well.
Now, tell us, after Chestatee Middle School and High School, what schools did you attend, and did Chestatee teach you lessons that you brought to college?
Yeah, for sure. So I attended the University of Georgia for my undergraduate degree. The fact that I went to UGA is directly tied to my experience at Chestatee Middle School. So when I was an 8th grader, my history teacher, Jeffrey Stewart, he and his wife were expecting their first baby. And as teachers do, they talk about their life. And so we started 8th grade, and one of the first things we learned from Mr. Stewart was my wife's about to have a baby. And my birthday's in September. And I, as an 8th grader, said, well, if your wife has your baby on my birthday, I want to be your babysitter. And he was like, okay. Well, his daughter, Hadley, was born on my birthday on September 8th when I was an 8th grader. And so I became their family's babysitter. And so I babysat for them all the way through high school until I went to college. And he and his wife both went to Georgia. And so that was a huge influence on why I went to Georgia. They were encouraging me to apply. My dad is a tech fan, and so it was not something I ever would have done. So Chestatee had a big part in how I ended up at the University of Georgia. And then I went with some friends from Chestatee, and just so much of what I learned as a student, I was able to use. I think I was very prepared for college in my experience. I think I had some of the best teachers, both at the middle school and the high school, ever. I think very highly of many of my teachers. And so that was my first college experience. And then I left college, came here, worked here. And while I was working here, got to work with a lot of my former teachers. And at that time, I worked in the front office. I was what's called the parent liaison, which most of my job, I was translating. So when I was in college, I learned Spanish. And so I worked in the front office, translating documents, taking phone calls in Spanish, translating meetings. And I loved that work. But I also got to hang out with middle school students a little bit. And through the SOAR program, and I really loved the part of my job that was students. And so I was getting to work in the middle school setting. I was working with several of my teachers who I loved, and hearing them still love teaching middle school. And so that influenced me to go back to graduate school to become a teacher. And so I went back to graduate school at the College of Charleston in the Citadel. I did a joint program with those two schools in Charleston and went back to school to be a middle school teacher. So actually all of my college experiences have been directly tied to the adult relationships that I had through Chestatee Middle School.
Now, if I could sort of pause you there and take it back a little bit, you mentioned the SOAR program, which of course we've mentioned on several of our podcast episodes. So tell us about that. How were you involved from being in the front office in the SOAR program?
Yeah, so the 1 year when I was working in the front office translating, we had a fairly large group, about 12 students in the school who really spoke no English at all. And that's really hard to come into a school environment, be thrown into every single class is being taught in a language you don't speak. We have a wonderful ESOL department here. I know a lot of the people who are still in that department, and they're phenomenal, but they're not translating. They're teaching English. So these students were just exhausted all day, every day, trying to do school in a new language. So I was approached at the time. SOAR was pretty new, and they asked, would I be willing to step away from my job in the front office and do a SOAR in Spanish to just give these kids a break so they could just speak Spanish for 1 hour a week, I think it was at the time. So I did. And so we did a Hispanic culture SOAR, and a lot of it was kids sharing their stories. We did film and art and food. We got to go to an art museum in Atlanta with the artist and who spoke Spanish. And so they got to go on a field trip in Spanish, which was really cool. We had a mom come and teach us how to cook sopes, which is a Mexican dish that I never had, but now my family loves because I know how to make it. And she came and made that in the culinary arts room with the kids. So it was really cool to get to be a part of that, even when I wasn't a teacher. And then when I came back as a teacher, I got to do SOAR again, and I did the yearbook with Miss Lakitrin.
Now, on that topic of coming back as a teacher, just kind of tell us about your teaching experience. What are some things that you learned, some lessons?
Ooh, I learned a lot as a teacher. I learned that I love teenagers. I am not currently a teacher, and I probably will not be a teacher again, but I will always work with teenagers. I really, really love middle and early high school. It's just the best. I love working with teenagers. I learned that I'm not as smart as I thought I was as a teacher. I was kind of a goody two-shoes, brown-nosing teacher's pet kid through most of school, and school came fairly easily to me, even in college. But I learned how I don't know everything. I worked with some really, really wonderful mentors in all of my teaching jobs who taught me so much about teaching, but about life, about what's important in life. So yeah, the lessons I learned from being a teacher are invaluable and continue to impact my life every day.
So tell us, when you came back, were there any influences really from Chestatee your first time around that led you to go to college and then to become a teacher?
To become a teacher, influences, okay. I never thought I would be a teacher. My sister was the one who always played teacher when we were kids. She had a desk and a whiteboard and everything in her room, and she'd set up her stuffed animals, which is hilarious because my sister is, in fact, the only one of my siblings and all of our spouses who was not a teacher. So I was a teacher. My husband's a teacher. My brother-in-law's a teacher. My brother's a teacher. His wife is a teacher. My sister's the only one who isn't. But I was very sure I did not want to be a teacher. And I came back here after college, and I worked in the front office. And I worked with, I think, some of the best teachers that I had. As a student, I worked with Suzanne Gerard, who was the principal at the time, but she was also my 7th grade science teacher. I worked with Jill Mole, who was my 8th grade math teacher and was still a math teacher here. Lynn Clemens, who was my 8th grade language arts teacher. Eric Elliott, who was my chorus teacher. Brittany Tyner, who was my art teacher. Jason Chesser, who was my PE teacher. So many people who were my teachers who still worked here. And they loved it so much. And I think probably the most influential of those would be Miss Gerard. She was very, very kind in my time in the office. I would just sit with her. And Lewis Shirley, who was the assistant principal at the time, was also the assistant principal when I was a student. And I would just go sit in either one of their offices and just talk about life and what I wanted out of my life and what I wanted out of my work. And they really influenced my desire to go back to teach, as well as certain students. There were a couple of students that I was really close to in my time working in the office. One in particular who he kind of was like my kid for a while. I would pick him up for school every day, take him home, go to events and things with his family. I translated for his mom a lot. And so just these wonderful teachers who poured into me as a kid and then were pouring into me as a young adult. And then as well as those connections with students, it was just like I wanted to be in a middle school. I wanted to be doing that because I was so appreciative of the impact that really those adults had on me as a kid and as an adult, and I wanted to do that.
So going again back to your student time here, I know we're swapping through a lot of different periods of the early 2000s, but tell us, when you were a student here, what did you do? Did you do club sports?
When I was a student here, everybody did everything because there weren't a lot of us. So I was in the chorus. It's kind of funny because Mr. Elliott has been the chorus teacher here for so long, but we had 3 chorus teachers in the first year and a half of Chestatee Middle School. So I was a part of a lot of transition in that department. I was part of the FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, from the very beginning. I was on the news team, so I did the morning announcements. I was the basketball manager for the girls basketball team, which is a not very cool thing to do, but it actually was a big part of my experience. I did that all the way through high school. And a teacher that I did not get to work with because she had left Chestatee, but Christy Mahalik was the girls basketball coach and someone who's been a big influence in my life. I still know her as an adult. And so I did that. I'm sure there are other things. I think I did 4-H at one point, which is funny because that's not my thing. We all just kind of were involved in everything because there were so few of us.
Now, staying with the student timeline, how did your relationships change going from middle school to high school?
It's so interesting to think about friendships from that time. I embarrassingly have not kept up with a lot of people from my middle and high school experience. I had a lot of the same friends, like we kind of ran in the same groups, but who my closest friends were changed a good bit. And then in high school, my best friend from church, since I was very young, transferred to Chestatee when I was a sophomore. So that had a big influence on my friendships because someone who wasn't even at my middle school, but I had been friends with for a long time, came to my high school. But again, it was such a small class, and we had all, started together, 6th graders, brand new. We started together as 9th graders when the high school opened. That a lot of those friendships stayed the same, but they changed some. And like I said, I haven't kept up with a lot of those people, but when I see them, it's good. If I run into them in town or, we see each other at an event, I have good relationships with those people. Something comes up, they message me on Facebook about something. They're all fond memories. It's just, life changes. So some of those change kind of year to year.
Now, as you were talking about being here very early on, tell us about that, your friendships and how it was really just so tightly knitted together here at Chestatee very early on.
Absolutely. I listened to your episode with Heather Chandler, who I knew as Miss Hayes when I was a kid, and she talked about how much Chestatee was a family in the early days, and it really was. I mean, we were brand new. We had to create this whole identity that didn't exist before. And so it really was just a family. She was right in describing it that way. And so I not only had my friends, but like I mentioned, like the teachers, the adults in the building were a huge part of my life. And they knew all about my life. They came to events and were very involved. But even like my friends' parents, like I run into my friends' parents maybe more often than people I was friends with, because a lot of the people I went to school with have moved away. But I see their parents and we're sharing memories. Same, my parents see people I went to school with and they'll be like, oh, I saw so-and-so. And so we had such a small community and just everyone knew everyone. I knew teachers I didn't even have. Some of them I was very close to and they were never even my teacher. Both at the middle school and the high school, because the middle school opened when I was a 6th grader and the high school opened when I was a 9th grader. So it was just very cool. It was very special. Several of us had teachers, either kids who had been at North Hall or West Hall, who the teachers came over here, or I came 5th grade from McEver, and we had some people who came from McEver over here. Like the very first media specialist was from McEver, and some of the ladies in the front office. So it was just, we all had all these connections and we had to be there for each other because there wasn't like a deep rooted Chestatee. We had to create that. So it was very cool and special time.
Now, thinking back, do you have a best moment or achievement that comes to mind when thinking of middle school or high school?
Full disclosure, I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I try not to focus on achievement because I've learned that that's not always healthy for me. When I've been asked this question before, how I often answer it is related to my involvement in the chorus program. I was involved in something called All-State Chorus, which is where you audition to be part of a state-level chorus. And so I did that as a 7th grader. I started in middle school. I have some fun memories from those trips. We used to travel down to Savannah. The very first time I went on that trip, I think Mr. Elliott had been here like 8 weeks and he had to take us on an overnight field trip. So it was a little crazy. And I did that all through high school. And so there's like a ceremony at the end for seniors who do it. They call it 6 years. They call those students a 6th year. And so that was a very big achievement. It was a small group of people across the state. It feels so disconnected from me now because I don't sing at all outside of, in my home or at church, standing in the aisles, not on the stage. And I was also part of something called the Governor's Honors Program, which is for high schoolers during the summer. And I also participated in that as a vocalist. So those are really big achievements that feel very far away and distant from my life now, but at the time were a really big deal.
Now, tell us, how do you believe Chestatee shaped you into the person you are today, especially going through all these different phases and positions here at Chestatee?
I think the greatest impact that Chestatee had on my life in every phase that I was here as a student, as a young adult, as a teacher, was I learned the importance of an adult influence on a teenager. The fact that I can list so many adults who impacted me as an 11, 12, 13-year-old, as a 22, 23, 24-year-old, and as a 29, 30, 31-year-old, some of them in all 3 of those phases, some of them in just one, how many of them I still know who are a part of my life, who have been there for big moments. So many of my teachers who were at my graduation, who were at my wedding. Mr. Elliott took the pictures at my wedding. Even my youngest child, when he was born, Miss Gerard's daughter was my nurse. And another friend from Chestatee's mom helped deliver my youngest child. So just big moments in my life that are all tied up in being a part of Chestatee, and all of these really influential adults who have really, that's all I want to do is be them, right? Like I work with teenagers in my home. I've worked with teenagers as a teacher through foster care. We work primarily with teenagers and will again, hopefully one day. I work with teenagers in my church. I've worked with teenagers at all the churches we've been involved in. So I think seeing the impact that an involved, caring adult could have on my life has pretty much informed everything I choose to do because I want to be that adult.
Now we're going to jump into our rapid fire, fast paced, but if you feel the need, you can slow it down. But this is Talent Talk. Question number 1. Did you get in trouble a lot as a student?
No, except that I have been outed that I skipped a lot of school in high school. But in middle school, no. By and large, I was a teacher's pet or a really skilled liar.
What's the weirdest trend your generation had back then?
Oh, man. This is tricky because I didn't think it was weird at all. I thought everything we did was so cool. We had this trend where we like tied ribbons around our necks like they were necklaces, which then transformed into the early 2000s punk rock choker phase. So we spent most of middle and high school with some form of a choker, which was really weird. And I live with teenagers and we listen to a lot of music, and they are somewhat tolerant of my boy band phase, but they have told me that the punk rock phase is very cringy and they are not interested in listening to my punk rock music. So I guess that was a weird trend too.
Was there a teacher you acted normal around but were secretly scared of?
Yes, Jill Mull, but I adore her now. Jill Mull was my 8th grade math teacher. She told my mother and I that at open house that it would be the hardest class I would ever have. And she might have been correct, but I had the pleasure of working with her when I returned to Chestatee as the parent liaison, and I think she's one of the greatest teachers I've ever known. But I am still low-key terrified of her.
What was your dream job as a kid?
I did not have a dream job. I moved through a lot of things. When I was little, I used to say I wanted to be a mom and an artist, which is hilarious. I have no visual art skills at all. I'm sure at some point I thought I would be a professional singer of some sort, though never a pop star, some sort of performer. I did a lot of theater. So I probably wanted to do that at some point. But I never knew what I wanted to be, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I changed jobs a lot.
What was your favorite field trip you went on?
Oh, man. I went on a lot of great field trips. When I was here 2 years, I had the same language arts teacher, Dana Richardson. I think she might still be at the high school. She may have retired. She was a phenomenal teacher. And she took us to the Renaissance Fair 2 years, which now as an adult sounds so silly and crazy. I can't believe she took us, but it was so fun. And we'd get extra credit if we dressed up. So that was really cool. And then I mentioned going to Savannah with All-State Chorus. I did that for 6 years, and it was always something I looked forward to. And then things like the National Honor Society Washington, D.C. trip or the chorus trip to Orlando, I'm too old for those traditions. So I'm aware of those traditions, and I knew about them working here. But anytime people talk about them, I'm always sad because I missed out.
What was the most popular hangout spot for you and your friends?
In middle school, we hung out at people's houses. It was the, time of a spend the night party. So my friends' houses. Or I mentioned we used to have a dance at the school once a month. So we hung out in the cafeteria and got to have a school dance once a month, which was very cool. In high school, we went to Longstreet Cafe every Friday. And then my friends hung out at my parents' house a lot in high school. We used to have a Bible study on Tuesday nights. There'd be like 35 people at my parents' house. And then everyone would stay and we'd watch American Idol. So that was a big hangout spot for me too.
If you could relive one school day, which one would it be?
Of middle school would probably be 8th grade day. I don't even remember the details of 8th grade day, but I only think happily about that day.
What's something you wish you could go back and tell your younger self, or a decision that you wish you could change?
Oh, man. We all have lots of decisions that we wish that we could take back. I think I would tell myself to not be so boy crazy. I had a boyfriend all the time, starting in 6th grade. Spoiler alert, I married none of them. So I would probably tell myself to calm down. You do not need a boyfriend. You will not meet your husband for a very long time.
If you had to describe your middle school experience in one word, which would it be?
Fun. I had so much fun in middle school, and I've dedicated my life to not stopping being a middle schooler.
Thank you for watching. This was episode 8 of The Eagle Experience. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to share and subscribe. I'm Zach Roach, and this is Cassie Adams. So until tomorrow or the next week or the next month's episode, thanks for joining us for another Eagle Experience.